Jurassic Park. The tropical rain fell in drenching sheets, hammering the corrugated roof of the clinic building. Roberta Carter sighed and stared out the window. From the clinic, she could hardly see the beach or the ocean beyond, cloaked in low fog. This wasn't what she expected when she had come to the fishing village of Bahia Nasco on the west coast of Costa Rica to spend 2 months as a visiting physician. She had been in Bahia Nasco now for 3 weeks, and it had rained every day. Everything else was fine. She liked the isolation of Bahia Nasco and the friendliness of its people. Costa Rica had one of the 20 best medical systems in the world, and even in this remote coastal village, the clinic was well maintained, amply supplied. But the rain, the constant, unending rain. Across the examining room, her well-trained paramedic Manuel cocked his head. "Listen," he said. And then she caught it. A sound blended with the rain, a deeper rumble that built and emerged until it was clear. The rhythmic thumping of a helicopter. She thought, they can't be flying in weather like this. But soon the helicopter burst low through the ocean fog, roared overhead, circled and came back. It was looking for a place to land. It was a big-bellied Sikorsky with a blue stripe on the side with the word InGen Construction. That was the name of the construction company building a new resort on one of the offshore islands. The resort was said to be spectacular and very complicated. Its construction had been going on for more than 2 years. Bobby wondered what was so urgent on that island that the helicopter would fly in this weather. Through the windshield, she saw the pilot exhale with relief as the helicopter settled onto the wet sand of the beach. Uniformed men jumped out and flung open the big side door. They were calling for a doctor. 2 black crewmen carried a limp body toward her, while a white man barked orders. Red hair appeared around the edges of his Mets baseball cap. "Is there a doctor here?" he called to her. "I'm Dr. Carter," she said. The red-haired man frowned at her. She was wearing cut-off jeans and a tank top. "Ed Regis, we've got a very sick man here, doctor." "Then you better take him to San Jose," she said. San Jose was the capital, just 20 minutes away by air. "We would, but we can't get over the mountains in this weather. You have to treat him here." The injured man was a kid, no older than 18. Lifting away his blood-soaked shirt, Bobby saw a big slashing rip along his shoulder and another on the leg. What happened to him? Construction accident, he fell. One of the backhoes ran over him. The kid was pale, shivering, unconscious. The men brought the body through and set it on the table in the center of the room. Manuel started an intravenous line, and Bobby examined the boy's wounds. Immediately, she could see that it did not look good. The kid would almost certainly die. A big tearing laceration ran from his shoulder down his torso. At the edge of the wound, the flesh was shredded. At the center, the shoulder was dislocated, pale bones exposed. A second slash cut through the heavy muscles of the thigh, deep enough to reveal the pulse of the femoral artery below. Her first impression was that his leg had been ripped open. "Tell me again about this injury," she said. "I didn't see it," Ed said. "They say the backhoe dragged him." "Because it almost looks as if he was mauled," Bobby Carter said, probing the wound. "Mauled?" Ed said. No, it was a backhoe, believe me." He was edgy, acting as if he had done something wrong. Bobby wondered why. She bent lower and continued probing the wound. If an earth mover had rolled over him, dirt would be forced deep into the wound. But there wasn't any dirt, just a slippery, slimy foam. "How long ago did this happen?" "An hour." Again, she noticed how tense Ed Regis was. Bobby Carter turned back to the injuries. It really did look like a maul. On the other hand, most of the body was unmarked, which was unusual for an animal attack. She looked again at the head, the arms, the hands. She felt a chill. There were short slashing cuts on both palms and bruises on the wrists and forearms. It looked like bites, she thought. "All right," she said. "Wait outside." "Why?" Ed said, alarmed. "Do you want me to help him or not?" she said, and pushed him out the door and closed it on his face. She didn't know what was going on, but she didn't like it. She reached for her little Olympus point and shoot. She took several snapshots of the injury, shifting her light for a better view. Then the kid groaned, and she put her camera aside and bent toward him. His lips moved, his tongue thick. "Raptor," he said. "Lhasa raptor." At those words, Manuel froze, stepped back in horror. "What does it mean?" Bobby asked. Manuel shook his head. "I do not know, doctor. Lhasa raptor? No es español. No, it sounded to her like Spanish. Then please wash him. No, doctor. He wrinkled his nose. Bad smell. And he crossed himself. Bobby looked again at the slippery foam streaked across the wound. She touched it, rubbing it between her fingers. It was almost like saliva. The boy's lips moved. Raptor, he whispered. In a tone of horror, Manuel said, Raptor bit him. What's a raptor? Bobby asked. It means upia, Manuel said. She frowned. The Costa Ricans were not especially superstitious, but she had heard the upia mentioned in the village before. They were said to be night ghosts, faceless vampires who kidnapped small children. According to the belief, the upia had once lived in the mountains of Costa Rica, but now inhabited the islands offshore. Manuel was backing away, murmuring and crossing himself. It's not normal, he said. It is the upia. Bobby was about to order him back to work when the injured youth opened his eyes and sat straight up on the table. Manuel shrieked in terror. The injured boy moaned and twisted his head, looking left and right with wide, staring eyes, and then he explosively vomited blood. He went immediately into convulsions, his body vibrating, and Bobby grabbed for him, but he shuddered off the table onto the concrete floor. Ed opened the door, saying, What the hell's happening? When he saw the blood, he turned away, his hand to his mouth. Bobby was grabbing for a stick to put in the boy's clenched jaws, but even as she did it, she knew it was hopeless, and with a final spastic jerk, he relaxed and lay still. Manuel called for the men, who came back into the room and took the body away. Ed appeared, muttering, I'm sure you did all you could. Then she watched as the men took the body away, back to the helicopter, and it lifted thunderously up into the sky. It is better, Manuel said. Bobby was thinking about the boy's hands. They'd been covered with cuts and bruises in the characteristic pattern of defense wounds. She was quite sure he had not died of a construction accident. He had been attacked, and he had held up his hands against his attacker. Where is this island they've come from, she asked. In the ocean, perhaps 120 miles offshore. Pretty far for a resort, she said. Manuel watched the helicopter. I hope they never come back. Well, she thought, at least she had pictures. But when she turned back to the table, she saw that her camera was gone. The rain finally stopped later that night. Alone in the bedroom behind the clinic, Bobby thumbed through her tattered paperback Spanish dictionary. The boy had said raptor, and despite Manuel's protests, she suspected it was a Spanish word. Sure enough, she found it in her dictionary. It meant ravisher or abductor. That gave her pause. The sense of the word was suspiciously close to the meaning of upia. Of course, she did not believe in the superstition, and no ghost had cut those hands. What had the boy been trying to tell her? From the next room, she heard groans. One of the village women was in the first stage of labor, and Elena Morales, the local midwife, was attending her. Bobby went into the clinic and gestured to Elena to step outside for a moment. Elena? See, doctor? Do you know what is a raptor? Elena was gray-haired and 60, a strong woman with a practical, no-nonsense air. See, Elena nodded. It means a person who comes in the night and takes away a child. A kidnapper? Yes. A upia? Her whole manner changed. Do not say this word, doctor. Why not? Do not speak of upia now, Elena said firmly, nodding her head toward the groans of the laboring woman. It is not wise to say this word now. But does a raptor bite and cut his victims? Bite and cut, Elena said, puzzled. No, doctor, nothing like this. A raptor is a man who takes a new baby. She seemed irritated by the conversation and started back toward the clinic. I will call to you when she is ready, doctor. I think 1 hour more, perhaps 2. Bobby went back to her room. Out of curiosity, she looked up raptor in the English side of her dictionary, and to her surprise, she found the word there too. Raptor, a bird of prey. Mike Bowman whistled cheerfully as he drove the Land Rover through the Cabo Blanco Biological Reserve on the west coast of Costa Rica. It was a beautiful morning in July, and the road before him was spectacular, hugging the edge of a cliff, overlooking the jungle and the blue Pacific. Bowman, a 36-year-old real estate developer from Dallas, had come to Costa Rica with his wife Ellen and daughter Tina for a 2-week vacation. Seated beside him, Ellen said, "Mike, are you sure this is the right road? We haven't seen any other people for hours." "Darling, you wanted a deserted beach," he said, "and that's what you're going to get." Ellen sighed. "I hope you're right." "Yeah, Dad, I hope you're right," said Tina from the back seat. She was 8 years old. Suddenly, a small black shape flashed across the road, and Tina shrieked, "Look, look!" Then it was gone, into the jungle. "What was it?" Ellen asked. "A monkey?" "Maybe a squirrel monkey," Bowman said. "Can I count it?" Tina said, taking her pencil out. She was keeping a list of all the animals she had seen on her trip, as a project for school. "I don't know," Mike said doubtfully. Tina consulted the pictures in the guidebook. "I don't think it was a squirrel monkey," she said. "According to this book, the beaches of Cabo Blanco are frequented by a variety of wildlife, including howler and white-faced monkeys, three-toed sloths, and coatimundi. You think we'll see a three-toed sloth, Dad?" "I bet we do." "Really?" "Just look in the mirror." "Very funny, Dad." Mike Bowman felt like a hero when they finally reached the beach. A 2-mile crescent of white sand, utterly deserted. He parked the Land Rover in the shade of the palm trees that fringed the area. Tina was already running down the beach. "Don't forget you need your sunscreen," Ellen called. "Later," Tina shouted, still running. "I'm going to see if there's a sloth." Ellen Bowman looked around at the beach and the trees. "You think she's all right?" "Honey, there's nobody here for miles," Mike said. "What about snakes?" "Oh, for God's sake," Mike Bowman said. "There are no snakes on a beach. Let her go. Let her have a good time." Tina ran until she was exhausted, and then she threw herself down on the sand and gleefully rolled to the water's edge. The ocean was warm, and there was hardly any surf at all. She sat for a while, catching her breath, and then she looked back toward her parents and the car to see how far she had come. Her mother waved, beckoning her to return. Tina waved back cheerfully, pretending she didn't understand. Tina wanted to stay right here and maybe see a sloth. Tina moved out of the sun, back from the water, to the shade of the palm trees. She sat down in the sand and noticed that three-toed tracks of birds were everywhere. She was idly looking at the tracks when she heard a chirping, followed by a rustling in the mangrove thicket behind her. She waited quietly, not moving, hearing the rustling again, and finally she saw the source of the sounds. A few yards away, a lizard emerged from the mangrove roots and peered at her. Tina held her breath. A new animal for her list. The lizard stood up on its hind legs, balancing on its thick tail, and stared at her. Standing like that, it was almost a foot tall, dark green with brown stripes along its back. Its tiny front legs ended in little lizard fingers that wiggled in the air. The lizard cocked its head as it looked at her. Tina thought it was cute, sort of like a big salamander. She raised her hand and wiggled her fingers back. The lizard wasn't frightened. It came toward her, walking upright on its hind legs. It was hardly bigger than a chicken, and like a chicken, it bobbed its head as it walked. She noticed that the lizard left three-toed tracks that looked exactly like bird tracks. The lizard came closer to Tina. Tina was amazed that it would come so close to her. Maybe it expected her to give it some food. Unfortunately, she didn't have any. Slowly, Tina extended her hand, palm open, to show she didn't have any food. The lizard paused, cocked his head, and chirped. Without warning, the lizard jumped up onto her outstretched hand. Tina could feel its little toes pinching the skin of her palm, and she felt the surprising weight of the animal's body pressing her arm down. And then the lizard scrambled up her arm toward her face. "I just wish I could see her," Ellen Bowman said, squinting in the sunlight. "I'm sure she's fine," Mike said, picking through the boxed lunch packed by the hotel. Then, from down the beach, carried by the wind, they heard their daughter's voice. She was screaming. She is quite comfortable now, Dr. Cruz said, lowering the plastic flap of the oxygen tent around Tina as she slept. Mike Bowman sat on a chair beside the bed, close to his daughter. Dr. Cruz radiated competence, and the Clinica Santa Maria, the modern hospital in Punta Arenas, was spotless. But even so, Mike Bowman felt nervous. There was no getting around the fact that his only daughter was desperately ill, and they were far from home. When Mike had first reached Tina, she was screaming hysterically. Her whole left arm was bloody, covered with a profusion of small bites, each the size of a thumbprint. And there were flecks of sticky foam on her arm, like a foamy saliva. He carried her back down the beach. Almost immediately her arm began to redden and swell. Mike would not soon forget the frantic drive back to civilization, the four-wheel drive Land Rover slipping and sliding up the muddy track into the hills, while his daughter screamed in fear and pain, and her arm grew more bloated and red. Long before they reached the park boundaries, the swelling had spread to her neck, and then Tina began to have trouble breathing. "She'll be all right now," Ellen said, staring through the plastic oxygen tent. "I believe so," Dr. Cruz said. "I have given her another dose of steroids, and her breathing is much easier. And you can see the swelling in her arm is greatly reduced." Mike Bowman said, "About those bites. We have no identification yet," the doctor said. "I myself haven't seen bites like that before, but you will notice they're disappearing. It's already quite difficult to make them out. Fortunately, I have taken photographs for reference, and I have washed her arm to collect some samples of the sticky saliva. One for analysis here, a second to send to the labs in San Jose, and the third we will keep frozen in case it is needed. Do you have the picture she made of the animal that bit her?" "Yes," Mike Bowman said. He handed the doctor the sketch that Tina had drawn, in response to questions from the admitting officials. She said it was a green lizard, the size of a chicken or a crow. "I don't know of such a lizard," the doctor said. "She has drawn it standing on its hind legs." "That's right," Mike Bowman said. "She said the lizard walked on its hind legs." The doctor frowned. He stared at the picture a while longer. "I'm not an expert. I've asked for Dr. Gutierrez to visit us here. He is a senior researcher at the Reserva Biológica de Carrara, which is across the bay. Perhaps he can identify the animal for us. He should be here any minute." Dr. Gutierrez turned out to be a bearded man wearing khaki shorts and shirt. The surprise was that he was American, a field biologist from Yale who had worked in Costa Rica for the last 5 years. Marty Gutierrez examined Tina thoroughly, lifting her arm gently, peering closely at each of the bites with a penlight. He measured them with a small pocket ruler. He then inspected the Polaroids and asked several questions about the saliva, which Cruz told him was still being tested in the lab. Finally, he turned to Mike Bowman and his wife, waiting tensely. "I think Tina's going to be fine," he said. "I just want to be clear on a few details. Your daughter says she was bitten by a green lizard, approximately 1 foot high, which walked upright onto the beach from the mangrove swamp?" "That's right, yes." "And the lizard made some kind of a vocalization?